Hello, I'm James,
Hi, I'm Jimmy,
and welcome to A Job Done Well.
the podcast that helps you improve your performance and enjoyment at work.
Good afternoon, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, James. How are you?
I'm doing fabulously, thank you very much. What are we talking about today then?
Well, today we have a special guest who's going to talk to us about how conflict is our greatest natural resource. I worked with Charles a number of years ago, and this is one of those things where it's just like a bolt from the blue hit me, and something really fascinating to share, how we reframe and how we act differently around conflict.
Yeah, right, very good.
But before we get into that, what have you been up to, James?
I have started Christmas shopping. I took Mrs. Lawther out today, and I have been Black Friday shopping. How Black Friday can happen on a Tuesday is beyond me, but I've been Black Friday shopping, and I have bought her a dressing gown, 20% off. She's delighted.
You are absolute. I mean, what have we had? What was it? Hose pipe, recipes, cooking course, and now a dressing gown.
I might actually go all in this year and buy a shopping trolley as well. Because she's getting to that stage in life where you need to drag one along behind you.
She's getting to that stage in life where she needs to push you down the hill. Mate.
Yeah,
it's like,
right,
come on.
She wasn't very keen with the idea. But there you go. That's what I've been doing. How about you?
Well, an observation that I made this week. One of the things I do is subscribe, like a lot of people, to things like vitamins and probiotics and God knows what else. And what I noticed that a lot of organizations are doing, you pay a cheaper price for subscribing than one-off purchase. That makes sense, right? Then you get your stuff each month, and then you realize that actually they do offers and new customers get it cheaper than even subscribers. So what you do is you cancel it and you come back in as a new customer and get the cheaper price, right? So it's all sensible. But I've noticed they're making it more and more difficult for you to cancel the subscriptions now. So now you think you want to cancel, before you just click the button, gone, start all over again. Now you can't find how you cancel anywhere. It's buried in like 0.6 font. And then you've got to phone someone who never answers the phone, who then tries to persuade you to stay. I think the whole concept of subscriptions is really good. But as soon as you get that dual pricing between new and loyal customers, if you don't reward loyalty, expect some churn. And when you get churn, I always get a bit negative about companies that make it difficult for you to find your way out of the organization. So it's just, short rant.
That's the difference between you and me, mate. When we have this what have you been up to conversation, yours are always really deep, whereas I'm invariably shallow. Make of that what you will.
Anyhow, I am seriously delighted to have one of my definitely thought leaders and mentors over the years, Charles Irvine, to come along and talk to us about conflict. Charles, welcome.
Thanks, Jimmy. Thanks, James. Good to see you guys.
I could wax lyrical about you, but do you want to tell everyone a bit about you and what you get up to?
Yeah, sure. And actually, I think I'm going to start with a little story. And that's a story of when I was about 12. When I was growing up in South Africa, it was under the height of the apartheid regime, and schools were segregated. So I went to a whites-only school. And then in my local area, a new school set up, and that was one of the first multiracial schools in South Africa. So I naturally, at 12, resigned from my school and joined the new school and went home to the dinner table to tell my folks, fully expecting praise and adoration for my move. And all hell broke loose because they just exploded, my father in particular. And I couldn't really work out what was going on. And of course, eventually I worked it out. What was happening was the school that I had joined was run by the Catholic Church.
Right.
Which was fair enough. The only problem was my father came from Northern Ireland, Belfast, and is a Protestant bishop. So he wasn't well pleased with the fact that I was now being educated by the Catholics. And so this was my first introduction to conflict, because that was the first time that I understood a compromise agreement. And essentially the compromise agreement we came to was that I could go to my new school Because clearly being in a multiracial school with a family that was politically active was the right thing to do. There was just one condition. We didn't tell Granny in Northern Ireland that the Catholics were educating me. So I guess, Jimmy and James, that's my kind of first foray into conflict and what it means. And at 29, I left South Africa and came to the UK and thought, maybe I could just work with this conflict stuff in the UK. And so I had a good 29 years of working around the world. And I think there was one consistent thing, Jimmy, that I saw time and time again. And that was just how much time, resource, energy we dedicate to denying the existence of conflict. It's not a conflict. It's a joke. It's simply something we say. It's something to be ignored. It's a disagreement. And so I became fascinated with what happens when we turn that human energy that we invest in negative interactions with each other like it's something we should avoid. And how do we pivot that world's energy from fighting to being a force for good? I think conflict is the world's greatest natural resource. I think people who sit in a kind of middle management role in organizations get it from both ends. They have issues that are not dealt with at a senior level that come piling down on them. And they are expected to be the ones that deal with all the issues for everyone that sits beneath them. And so you have this real pincer movement happening. And I really feel for so many people in those roles who do an amazing job of navigating the day-to-day dynamic.
And I think it also does really nicely follow up to a couple of episodes that we did earlier in this season where we talked about how you work with difficult people and how you have difficult conversations. And actually this is a broader way of thinking about it as opposed to tactically dealing with those sort of pain points.
I used to run a program called Managing Difficult People. And what I loved about it is everybody who arrived with a very clear picture of that other person who was the difficult person. And then they somehow found that in the group, all the people in the room were the difficult people. So I think it's really interesting how we name the other as the difficult person, but God forbid, never ourselves.
Well, you'll be pleased to know that, Charles, that one of the bits of advice that we gave was to consider, are you the difficult person? And how do you come across to others? And maybe you want to change some of your behaviors rather than others all the time. So, yeah, but I guess just to sort of a step back, though, I think it's quite a bold statement, isn't it? Conflict is our greatest natural resource. And it's quite provocative, deliberately so. And so first off, I guess, why do you say conflict is the greatest natural resource? And then how do you go about shifting that mindset that we've been had it drummed into us our whole lives?
And I think you're right, Jerry. So for me, the best way to kind of think about it is to use the analogy of water.
Yeah.
So we all know that water is an amazing natural resource. But unless you've had a few, I haven't really come across anyone who tries to deny water.
Yeah.
It kind of just is, and it's a natural resource. But what we also know about water is that it has the capacity to feed, nurture, grow things. But water also destroys, floods, and kills.
Yes.
And what we know about water is we've got to channel it. So there's absolutely no good in just saying, okay, great, water is a natural resource, but we don't try and channel it and we don't try and work with it. I think what doesn't help us is us demonizing this thing called conflict or seeing conflict as somehow bad or anti-human or not right. And the wonderful thing about humans is we're all different. So guess what? There are going to be differences and conflicts. And I'm trying to get us to all say, when that moment happens, whether it's a small difference, because we don't like to call it conflict, I would call it conflict, but when that small thing happens, instead of us going, oh my God, let me get away from this, or that didn't happen, or that was just a joke, or let me just ignore this, Because let me tell you, there's nothing like the long tail of conflict if we don't deal with it. If you just think of any conflict you've had to manage or deal with, how much thinking time post that event do you dedicate to it? Hours. It interferes with your sleep.
If you've got conflict ahead,
Yeah,
I think you spend a lot of time dreading
absolutely.
it, not thinking about how you can deal with it, just not looking forward
Trading
to
it.
it.
Yeah.
Then you do whatever happens. And I'm bad. I hold a grudge. I'm not going to lie. And so there are people that I would guess I had conflict with decades ago, and I can still remember what was
Yeah.
said and
Yeah.
how it felt, and hold some, obviously shrinking, but some level of animosity about them and that experience.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, what you make me think about now, I was listening to What's Up Docs, which is one of those great podcasts. They're dealing with all kinds of stuff. And one of the people they had on was a woman, a professor who specializes in memory.
Yeah.
And she used a lovely analogy that memory is like Wikipedia. You start the entry yourself, but other people all add to it. And what you're saying here, Jimmy, is you will hold your memory of that conflict.
Yeah.
But chances are their memory is never the same.
Yeah.
And so what we do is we'll end up fighting about our memories.
Yeah.
And so what you've said here is that we build this thing called conflict into something that we either prepare for, and we prepare for the fight, or we get anxious. And what's better is we start imagining, fantasizing about the other person to such a degree that we attribute to them probably more intellect and capability and thoughts than they ever brought. We come to this thing and then we never let it go. So all I'm trying to do by suggesting that conflict is our greatest natural resource is, first of all, to just allow us to see it's human. It's natural.
Sorry, just a thought that goes through my head. In a way, the opposite of conflict is consensus, you could argue. And it's not a long way from consensus to groupthink, which is really very, very bad. So when you start to look at that, I mean, when is it conflict or just a diversity of opinion? And trying to subvert it is really very dangerous for organizations.
Absolutely. And that's why I would go further and argue that I don't think people give their proper opinion in order to achieve this alleged compromise or consensus. And what, like when you're in a cartoon and you've got that little thought bubble. For me, what happens in that consensus time is that what's coming out my mouth is, yes, great, I completely agree. My thought bubble is, what part of idiot thinks that? I'll come back to this later. So actually, we still get nowhere. But for me, the starting point has got to be dealing with our feelings of anxiety, anger, dread, fight, all of those very natural feelings, which I think we can help by just getting our thinking into a space that says, okay, it's normal. And for me, sometimes, Jimmy, I've found that replacing the word conflict almost with choice. So if I don't want to use the word conflict, or it's so ingrained in me to think that it's a negative thing, when you see it happening, why don't you think choice? I've got a choice. I've got lots of choices here. I can either fight this, I can ignore it, or guess what? I can use it.
I get it's a natural resource, and I get there's a lifetime of gravitational pull towards it's a negative.
Yeah.
But when you capture the conflict and you use it to its advantage and you have the right mindset, what's the benefits it gives you?
I think there's a huge amount of benefits, one of which is very much what James's point was, which is that you then start to be able to actually understand and tap into the thoughts, the thinking, the wisdom, the expertise of the people you're in conflict with. Because inevitably you think differently to them and they've got different agendas. So again, don't let me start on agendas. Why on earth do we think that an agenda is somehow a negative thing that we've heard. Oh, you've got a hidden agenda. Like you're the devil incarnate. Guess what? Jimmy's human. I mean, James deals with him all the time, so he knows that. But it's the most human thing in the world to have an agenda. So what the hell are we doing hiding it? Why don't I come to you, James, and say, do you know what? My agenda is this. This is what I want to achieve. Then I've just taken all the assumptions and hyperbole around from this and saying, I put it on the table. This is what I want to achieve. So I think, Jimmy, what I'm saying here is the first thing that you benefit from is that you actually tap into a resource you don't have access to before, and that's the other person's thinking.
So I think that's a really powerful point. I mean, these things are never black and white. So if I take somebody, it will not surprise our listeners to realize that I do not have a very high opinion of Donald Trump. Yeah, I think the man's a complete Fruit Loop. However, if you start to say to yourself, well, what has he done that I agree with? Well, actually, there were quite a few things that he's done that I agree with, which I think are eminently sensible. So it's never black and white or a weakness.
And you do close yourself off. If you have a view that so-and-so is an idiot, you are closed off to every idea they have, including the good ones, which even in that extreme example of Donald Trump, you will find that he's done some good. But we're closed to that. Our podcast is all about helping people, teams and organisations perform better and enjoy work more.
I go as far as to say that we believe that everyone and every team has the potential to transform their performance by optimising what they currently do.
So if you'd like to discuss how we can help you transform your performance, then get in touch or maybe check out our website. We also do speaking events, mentoring and advice work as well. So back to the benefits then. So you've got the tap into people's thinking expertise. You're just about to say, save yourself.
Yeah, so save yourself from creating a past that becomes a shackle. Because I think what we're doing when we don't deal with conflict well, it becomes the long tail. And so we ruminate over it. It actually then informs the kinds of people that we think we can deal with the next time. It informs the situations that we're having.
I presume as well, it must, your relationships must improve.
Yeah.
It's going to be very different to interact with somebody who has this belief and this mindset towards conflict than it does the traditional way of thinking around conflict. So it's got to improve relationships, isn't it?
And I think it makes meetings more effective. Let's just look at that, for example. I mean, how many of us have tolerated when we sit in meetings and people are not saying what they think, but they step out into the corridor and then they say what they think. And then guess what? We have to have 3 other meetings about it because no one is actually saying what they think. And then guess what? We're coming to a conclusion that there's not buy-in to. And then, oh my God, we suddenly decide that it takes us years to implement something. Why? Because we're not having that robust conversation when we should. So one of the things that we've looked at statistically is managers' time. How much time are you spending trying to navigate conflicts or disputes that haven't been worked with properly? And the statistics are showing us that it's at least 40%, at a minimum, 40% of management time is spent trying to deal with dysfunctional relationships, poorly made decisions, and conflict in the workplace.
A friend of ours says he enjoyed work. He said he spent a third of his time doing really interesting stuff, but he spent another third of his time politicking, and he spent the third of his time being politicked. Now, it's all right, it's a very throwaway comment, but it does kind of reinforce your point about the amount of time we spend on this.
And we call it politicking, James, but it's the conflict, but we give it another name because we don't want to deal with it.
Just on that, don't want to deal with it. How many meetings have both you been in where there is clearly a difference of opinion and you hear that classic line, we'll take that offline?
Yeah.
I mean, it always happens.
Just to be the devil's advocate, and then they throw in this kind of verbal dagger that hits the room. And then as soon as, I had a group of people I was working with a few years ago now, and we were just doing one of those normal exercises where everyone was logging down the issues that they had, right? All on that great old post-it note strategy. The group was standing there and looking at it, and one person was standing right at the back and said to the person in the front, just move that post-it from here to there. Okay? And before we knew where we were, the person in the front exploded. And that's so typical of you. You never do anything yourself. You stand in the back lines. They went off, right? The whole group froze. And in those few seconds afterwards, we got almost every standard response to conflict. Okay? A few people looked at the floor. One guy tried to make a joke. Somebody else suggested we had a tea break. Somebody else suggested that maybe there was a different time. We'll take this offline. There's a different time to deal with this. As soon as that happened, I relaxed. Thinking conflict is a great natural resource. Finally, the issues are on the table. And I invited everyone to take a seat, and we actually had a real conversation. The first one they had in 5 years.
How do you shift your thinking from, I've always thought that conflict was a negative thing and to be avoided and to being able to see, because I like the benefits. I want more productive meetings. I want better relationships. I want better thinking. I want to unlock people's expertise. So I get all that. How would you recommend people start thinking about it so they can really unlock that?
I think the first thing we have to do is to be gentle with ourselves and with other people. And there's a great expression: do you look at people with sharp or curious eyes? And I think some of us are very good at looking at ourselves with sharp eyes and are very critical. So the starting point for me is take a chill pill. No one is particularly good at it. You're in good company.
Yeah.
I think the second thing is, before any conflict happens, have a conversation about conflict.
Right.
And let's give an example. You're sitting down in your team and you're saying to them, I was dialing into this podcast on the way to work, and I heard this bonkers notion that conflict was a great natural resource, but I want to give this one a go. So in our team, I would like us to talk about, what does a healthy conflict culture for us mean? And my point is, if you have a conversation about how you all think about conflict, the relationship you have with conflict, and what you want to do when there is conflict, before there's a conflict, it makes it a lot easier then, when an issue emerges, for you to say, here we go. I mean, if I was to say to you, what's your relationship with conflict? Like, how were you brought up in terms of conflict, or how to have conflict? What would you guys say?
Well, the thing that brought it home for me was when we did some work together many years ago, and we had just done this thing on conflict, and I was in an exec meeting, and we had I can't remember, it was about budgets or something, and we had a decent, robust debate about something. Came out of the meeting, and one of the team came up to me afterwards and said, Jimmy, are we all right? I was like, what do you mean, are we all right? Yeah, of course we're all right. No, really, I mean, that was brutal. That was savage. Are we okay? I was like, no, I think we just had a small disagreement there. And what struck me was that, to this person, they because we had disagreed, to them it was brutal and it was a big deal. Fair play to them. They came and talked to me about it, so fair play. But what I realized is that my relationship with conflict, growing up the way I did, was that if somebody wasn't trying to physically attack me, that's conflict to me. You know, it's
Right.
physical violence is conflict. Throwing stuff, name calling, abuse. So physical or verbal abuse is conflict. Anything else ain't conflict. And so one of the things I had to rethink was, actually, I have to think about my relationship and my view of conflict, but I have to think about everyone else's as well. So because I think it's nothing, if it's brutal to someone else, I need to think about my part in that interaction and what did I do to make it feel like a brutal experience. I don't want people to have a brutal experience when they disagree with me. I mean, so that helped me kind of reset my levels and views on conflict and how I interact with others and how they view it. I don't know, James, what about you? You create conflict.
No, I do create conflict, you're right. So I am really bad. My kids will tell you I'm dreadful. I am Mr. Calm and even. I don't get excited. I'm and then all of a sudden I just flipping snap. I'm bang. I'm a bit like the bloke who was screaming about the post-it note, you know. I went down, there's a museum in South Wales called the Big Pit, fascinating museum. And I urge anybody listening, go to the Big Pit because it's fascinating. And it's an old British coal mine. And you go down there and they explain to you about how they used to mine coal. And then, of course, the first bloke goes in and his job, the first shift, they go in and they drill into the seam. And then the second shift come in and their job is they take the coal out. And as they take the coal out, they put the pit props in to hold the ceiling up. And the third job is the third shift come in and their job was called crashers. They get paid extra. But what the crashers do is they pull the pit props out behind where they've just been. And of course, then the whole world comes down. And they get paid more for that, if you imagine. But one of the things he said was that they'd moved from wooden pit props to steel pit props. Now the miners hated steel pit props. And although the steel pit props were stronger, the thing with wooden pit props is when a wooden pit prop was about to go, it would start whining first. You could hear it. Whereas when the steel pit prop went, it just bloody went. People died. And I think this is my interpretation of what you're telling me about conflict, is you don't want to be an all or nothing sort of thing. You want people to whine like a wooden pit prop. You want people to be explicit about what their issues are. Because if you get the issues out on the table, you can do something about it. Whereas if you hide it and then just snap, it's a bit chuffing late. Is I understood properly what you're saying?
Yeah, I love that, because I think also what you're saying, James, is that one has to look at the range of different contexts within which one is calling something conflict. Because as you're describing here, Jimmy, there's when you're in a moment and you're having a discussion, how are different people experiencing that discussion? And the biggest thing you're looking for is, are we creating an environment where people can be honest? Now, one of the expressions I hate the most is this whole notion of, I'm just brutally honest. Well, frankly, that means you're just brutal. Because why on earth do we think that you should have the right to express your opinion with no thought about how you might be heard? I have a responsibility when I want to work well with conflict for thinking about, in any situation, how am I expressing the things that I want to express in a way that maximizes the ability of other people to hear me? And I think what you're talking about here, James, is that when we're talking about conflict, we can be talking about historic conflicts. I worked in an organization where this group of people wanted me to manage the conflict that existed between them and another organization. The conflict had been going 20 years. None of the people in either organization had started the conflict, but man, they were loyal to it. And this one had been going 20 years. We've got to think about conflict in the moment. We've got to think about what's gone on in the past that we need to clear and deal with, and think about the future conflicts that are coming down the line and how we prepare well for them. And there's a lovely Irish mythology story that can help us when we're in particular thinking about conflict in the moment or conflict of the past. And in Ireland, there are 4 provinces. And there's a wonderful Irish mythology that talks about the 5th province. And when I'm working with some situations of conflict, what I will do is invite people to come into the 5th province. And the rules are very simple. Like, guys, Jimmy, James, you're very welcome to your weapons. Those are lovely weapons. They look delightful. In fact, they're so shiny, you should be really proud of them. Here's the thing. You leave them in the province you come from, just outside the door. But when you come into the 5th province, you can't bring them with you. But don't worry, because at any time you can leave. So don't get separation anxiety. It's completely fine. You can go back to your weapons. And what we find is when we give people the assurance that they don't have to let go of their resentments. They don't have to let go of the fight. They don't have to let go of their egos. They just have to free their brains enough to start to have a conversation. And what you find is when you're in the fifth province, things start to shift. So the great secret is that when you've got into the fifth province, you never come out the same. Because something in the dynamic and something in the relationship will have shifted. So I guess one of the tips here would be to think about, where am I at? Is it a past conflict which needs a particular strategy? Is it something that I'm going into right now that I could manage differently? Or is it something in the future? And the golden rule is deal with it.
Well, can you imagine the amount of time that's spent not dealing with conflict? How much of your mental and emotional capability, actually, there's a whole kind of liberation of my thinking where I'm not just tied to, I remember all those times we fell out, Charles. I remember all those things that you did to me. I know we've got to have another conversation next week. I'm not looking forward to it. And I mean, I don't have to worry about that.
We hope you're enjoying and getting value from listening to our podcast.
If you are, please, can you share it online on social media with friends and colleagues?
We appreciate 5-star reviews, and we really do, but any feedback on how we can improve or subject that you'd like us to cover, just drop us a line and get in touch.
This all helps us bring the best quality show to you to ensure that you can improve your performance and enjoyment of work.
Our assumptions play havoc with how we work with conflict. Because my assumption is, because you and I had a bad conversation before, that the next conversation we're going to have is going to be even worse. The next assumption I have is that basically, Jimmy, you're out to get me. And I know this for a fact, because of course, what I think is a fact, what you think is assumptions, but mine are all factual. So we have this wonderful conversation with ourselves where we build those assumptions. So I guess the other thing that we can think about is how we identify the assumptions that are holding us back. And there's a great story for me about when I was a young chap, when I was in South Africa. We used to go to the circus a lot. And there's these huge, big African elephants in the circus. So we go into the circus, and the thing that fascinated me as a kid was when we came out of the circus, these huge animals were tied to tiny wooden pegs in the ground, and they didn't run away. I was like, Dad, what's going on? Why are they not running away? And what he explained was this. He said, my boy, what happens is we bring the elephants into the circus when they're babies, and we tie them to the wooden pegs. And those babies pull and pull and pull, and they can't get free. And then they stop trying. And they grow up, and they never try again. What I'm suggesting is, if you were to start to think about what are the pegs I carry around conflict, either how I thought about it or the assumptions I make about what it means to give my opinion. How often do we hear, oh, it's very career limiting to give your opinion? Is that really the case, or is that the narrative we all contribute to that stop us from doing it? So I guess there's something that we have to really think about, is how do our own upbringing and our mindsets about other people, about the situation, all of those things collude, if you like, to make us fearful of conflict, try and avoid it, or deny it.
The peg story is a fantastic one. It's a really vivid analogy, a good way to sort of bring it to a summary, really, which I guess we talked about the why would you want to have conflict? You know, there's the benefits of it, and they are everything from relationships to unlocking better thinking to the liberation of not falling out with people. How do you go about kind of shifting your thinking from conflict is about having fights and it's a negative to actually it helps me do these things? Well, like you said at the outset, water can help you grow, and it can kill you. It depends on how you think about it, how you use it. and that's, like say, conflict's the same thing. James, any final thoughts from you?
Well, no, sorry, I'm sitting listening to this, and I'm not totally sold, Charles. I'll be honest with you, but I sort of get it, but not entirely. Because my take on what you're saying is not so much conflict is the greatest resource, but facing into conflict can be the greatest resource. So it's not so much you want the conflict, but you want to understand the reasons behind the conflict. And it's almost like having a pot on the simmer as opposed to having a pot boiling over. You want to understand it and harness it. You don't want it to go bang, but it's just, I suppose, the semantics about the word conflict.
I think, James, that's interesting, because when you use that analogy of the pot and something in the pot, what's in the pot and the pot is the conflict. If it boils over, it's not much good to you and it can burn you. And if you allow it to simmer, it can produce the most amazing food to eat. So my argument would be, if we accept that conflict simply is, it's neither good nor bad, it simply is. It's what we do with it.
So that's how you manage it rather than,
Yeah. And that's why also it's a great source of innovation. Because actually, if you see it in that way, you can welcome the conflictual views because you're not scared of it. Because you can produce something that is so wonderful because it's percolated by the collective. But if it boils over, it will damage. This is a difficult thing for us to get our heads around. Then the most simple starting point is to start having conversations about conflict with those around you. How do you find it? What do you experience of it? Because that act alone takes some of the fear of it away. There's going to be some days for all of us, me included, when I'm not up for dealing with any conflict, where I don't want to take it on, and where actually I'm deciding today, to hell with it. I'm not dealing with it. But I'm doing that consciously. It's a choice.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Charles, for coming and sharing your perspectives on conflict. Fascinating as ever.
That was great fun. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed it.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers now.
We cover a whole host of topics on this podcast,
from purpose to corporate jargon,
but always focused on one thing: getting the job done well.
Easier said than done. So if you've got unhappy customers or employees, bosses or regulators breathing down your neck,
if your backlogs are out of control and your costs are spiraling, and that big IT transformation project that you've been promised just keeps failing to deliver,
we can help. If you need to improve your performance, your team's performance, or your organisation's, get in touch at jimmy@ajobdonewell.com
or james@ajobdonewell.com.